Okay, it is 6 o'clock. Jody, we're ready. Erica, you're ready. It is 6 o'clock. It is Tuesday, September 24th. We are in the council chambers in the city of Platteville, and I am calling our meeting to order, and Jericho will start with roll call.
Barbara Dawes.
Here.
Bob Gates.
Here.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Tom Nall.
Here.
Lynn Parrott.
Here.
Kathy Kopp.
Here.
Todd Casper.
Todd is excused. He texted Clint and I a few minutes ago saying stuck in Dubuque due to the Wisconsin bridge accident. Complete gridlock here. Won't make the meeting unless you send me a helicopter. And then Clint said that we had just cut that from the budget, so there was hardly
Stuck.
yeah, so he's stuck. So we wish him the best as he deals with that. Okay, the first item on our agenda then tonight is a public hearing ordinance 24-10, amending the zoning map, which is part of the official zoning ordinance of the city of Platteville. And we'll start with staff presentation. Joe.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so this is a request regarding the property at 470 Washington Street. This property was just recently sold. The purchasers are the applicants this evening. After they purchased it, when they're going through financing and some of the due diligence, realized that the property zoning is doesn't match the current use of the property. So the property as it sits there right now is a 4-unit apartment building. It's zoned R2, 1 and 2 family residential, which allows, as the name implies, single family and duplex, but does not allow a 4-unit building. So as it sits there now, that means it's a non-conforming use of that property. So the issue that they're running into is from a financing and it will be an insurance standpoint. If that building were to burn down or be destroyed, they would not be able to rebuild in its current situation. It'd have to be a use that's conforming with the zoning. So that is creating some issues from the financing. And then, like I said, that will be a zoning issue or a insurance issue as well. So to alleviate that issue, they are requesting to change the zoning of the property to R3 multifamily residential, which would allow a unit apartment building. So we're not really sure how this situation exactly came about. If you look at the property, it appears that it was built as a single family home. The assessor's files say it was built in 1955. So sometime after that, it was reconverted or remodeled and converted. Our best guess, looking at the building permit record, is that it was done during the 1980s. There were a lot of permits issued for that building during that time, including an addition that was done at that time. So that's my best guess. All of the older records that I could find regarding the rental licensing and so forth all indicated it's a 4-unit building. So it's been that way for quite some time. So as I said, the request is to change the zoning to match the current use of the property. So since it has been that way for quite a while, it really will not have an impact on the neighborhood because the neighbors are used to that use on the property. And there are other R3 properties in that neighborhood, including larger apartment buildings. So staff does recommend approval of the change to R3, and the planning commission also recommended approval. Any questions?
You were provided with some maps. One is a map of where the property is. If you're familiar with Miners Field and Washington Street, you can see the arrow there. And then the following map shows the zoning: brown, blue, green, and I guess rust are the colors. And again, that's pointed out. Joe, well, we'll get to that. Any questions of Joe? Questions of Joe? Then the next item of a public hearing is the applicant statement. So the applicant is welcome to come introduce herself and make a statement.
Thank you for your time. We all appreciate that you're here. We both do. Just want to let you know that we purchased this property. We did find out this.
You need to start by introducing yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Michelle Eno. We just purchased the property and I'm from Barneveld, Wisconsin. We purchased the property and, I guess don't want to repeat everything Joe said, but that's pretty much what happened. We want to have this property conforming. Since then, we also want to make improvements. We've already installed smoke detectors in all the units and trying to do as much as we can, as soon as we can, to make the property look better as well. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, I have not had anybody register and give me a green slip in terms of public statements in favor. Did you receive anything from neighbors or anything?
Oh, I did, well, I did receive an email prior to the plan commission meeting. It was anonymous, so I don't know exactly who it was from, if it was a neighbor or not, but it just said they were not in favor of the request.
But you haven't received a subsequent email since the plan commission acted,
Oh,
and obviously no
nothing.
one is here tonight.
Correct.
There are no public statements in general. So council discussion.
So this is just a matter of it being rezoned. Don't pay any money. There's nothing, we're just rezoning it, giving
Right.
her.
Right, because it's been a non-conforming use. It's been a 4-unit apartment building in an area that's zoned for 1 and 2 R1 and R2. So it's been a non-conforming use. They're asking to change it to R3, which is the use that it's been since the 80s, maybe, for
That's good.
40 years. Maybe, and so basically, so they can get, so you could rebuild if something happened. I mean, if it's a non-conforming use, you couldn't rebuild the kind of property that's there, so. So Lynn, are we okay?
Yeah, grandbaby's calling me. I turned
Okay.
it off, but yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, but I got it. I just want to see if it was gonna cost anything. 'Cause if
no, it
it's not
doesn't,
gonna
well, I
cost-
don't know, it costs us to publish notices, but nothing,
Yeah.
doesn't really cost us
Yeah,
anything.
no,
That would be unusual. Right. Any other questions? Ken?
I'm making the assumption that you intend to convert it to 4 units.
It currently is 4 units.
Well, if you're gonna make use of all 4 units. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Then I would, if there are no other questions, I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
Move we close the public hearing.
I'll second. Okay, we have a motion by Ken and a second by Kathy to close the public hearing. Do I hear any action?
I'll move to approve rezoning the property at 470 North Washington Street to R3 multifamily residential.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Kathy and a second by Lynn to approve the rezoning of 470 North Washington Street to R3 multifamily residential. Jerica will vote.
Doss,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Null,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, that's our public hearing for tonight. So we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a special presentation on the Platteville Main Street program. Michael.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Walsh. I'm the Executive Director for the Platteville Main Street Program. I'm also a resident of Platteville. I live at 435 West Madison Street. I'm here tonight to report on the last year's Main Street Program initiatives and accomplishments. Report I handed out details everything from the last year. I know you haven't had a chance tonight to go through all that, but I'll try to highlight some of them. I know you'll have a busy agenda tonight, so I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly. Businesses have come and gone, but the storefronts remain full in downtown. The economic impact of new business is apparent as traffic in the district has increased year over year since 2020. Last year alone, it increased by 18%, which equates to 3.1 million visitors to the downtown district. We've expanded on events to make them more appealing to everyone and attract visitors from around the tri-state area. We saw record turnouts at Sweet Treats, Holiday Magic on Main, the pub crawl, and Music in the Park. Sweet Treats saw more than 1,200 people flood Main Street to see their favorite movie and Disney characters. The pub crawl, which is our newest annual event, had record turnout. Music in the park was expanded to make more food options available, which increased attendance by more than 30% this year. And our holiday celebration was redesigned and included a collaboration of over 8 different organizations to make it the biggest success we've had in recent years. Our community garden is also expanding. In the last year, new plots have been added and current plots have been upgraded as interest in the program continues to increase. I'd like to give a special shout out to Gary Munson for all of his hard work and dedication in maintaining the community garden for us. He's done an outstanding job. All in all, we had more than 30 events take place in the downtown district over the last year. One program that's near dear to my heart is a senior nutrition program. Statistics show that over 12% of all senior citizens in Grant County suffer from food insecurity, which is a staggering number. Being able to buy affordable, nutritious food is a major concern to our senior population. To help combat this issue, we distributed over $7,000 in food vouchers to the senior nutrition program, which helps provide food stability to residents in need. We also distribute fresh fruits and vegetables throughout the summer and fall to over 500 residents in the downtown district. Over the last year, we completed the fire mural and the Main Street banner projects. We invested over $5,000 in city park updates and continue to look for opportunities to invest in beautifying our downtown district with new artwork and sculptures. We are instrumental in bringing the Connecting Entrepreneurial Community Conference to Platteville, which helps showcase Southwest Wisconsin to representatives from around the state and inject over $20,000 into our local economy. We were also instrumental in the Focus on Energy pilot program, which invested over $233,000 in local businesses in the form of HVAC and utility updates. Currently, we're working with the city on grant opportunities that would help downtown businesses further our beautification efforts in the downtown district. And I think everyone would agree that social media has been vital in marketing. It has become the #1 medium for advertising. Over the last year, the Main Street program changed directions on how we market our downtown district and utilize social media algorithms to increase our online presence. The result is a 100% increase in the number of followers and a reach that is over 400% more. That's all in 1 year, which helps account for the increase that we've seen in tourism and event participation. The work we do, it doesn't come without a price, and we rely on the city donations and sponsorships to fund all of our programs. And with the economy being the way it is, everybody's feeling the effects. Looking forward, we will continue to work for opportunities to fund our projects. We'll also continue to develop and grow relationships with businesses and organizations, expand on events, arts and culture, promote Main Street and district businesses, and above all, make Platteville's historic Main Street a vibrant destination for residents and visitors. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Okay, questions of Michael?
I have one, Michael. Great report. Good job. Just do have a question though. On the, talk about social media, the increase in visitor. You make the statement that, businesses have come and gone, storefronts remain full, and the economic impact of new businesses is apparent as traffic in the district has increased year over year since 2020. That equates to over 3.1 million visitors annually.
Correct.
Clarify the visitor, is that online
No.
and traffic? That's
That is
3 million people?
in person. And that number comes from geofencing data that is collected through the state. That's how we get the numbers, because I myself cannot attain those numbers, but we work through the WEDC to be able to obtain visitor information based on geofencing data. And it was 3.1 million over the course of a year. Now, within those numbers, it could be residents. These aren't all people that do not live in Platteville. They could live in Platteville as well. But visitations within the downtown district equaled 3.1 million.
Okay, so I was just questioning whether it was social media visitor or just people in the downtown.
People.
What is geo?
3.1 million divided by 365, it means that there's thousands of people in the downtown every day.
Mhm. Not thousands, but I mean, traffic within the downtown.
So it's car traffic as well
Yes.
as visitors. So if you just drive down
Somebody
the
drives through
street,
downtown and they have their phone on, 9 times out of 10, it's gonna pick that up. But it's. but
So
you divide that over-
geofencing is, explain that to people.
Okay, geofencing data is, it's typically used by larger corporations in order to be able to track people that are buying and selling. So if Starbucks wanted to use it, they could put a little clip on your phone to where if you walked into Badger Brothers and ordered a coffee, when you go through Facebook the next time, you're gonna see a Starbucks ad. So it's a way to be able to track where you're at. They use your phone's location to actually be able to tell where you're located at any given time. It's Big Brother.
So we could report, I could go in Badger Brothers 4 times and I'll get geo-tracked for 4 visitors,
Go in and out of the district
right?
4 times, it's gonna pull it up as 4
Yeah.
times.
So that's how it is. Back and forth. But however, it looks good on marketing, but yeah.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions of Michael?
This is great.
Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Right.
Nice presentation.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the consideration of our consent agenda. Tonight we have council minutes from September 10th. Payment of bills as we're in your program, appointments to boards and commissions. Tonight I'm appointing Ela Kakade to the Redevelopment Authority. Licenses, 1 and 2 year operator licenses to serve and sell alcohol is in your packet. Resolution 24-11 proclaiming October as United Nations Month, and Resolution 2412, our application for exemption from the levy of any county library tax.
I have a motion.
Okay,
I move to approve all items listed under consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Bob and a second by Tom to approve the consent agenda as presented. Jericho will vote.
Doss,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nall,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, word to citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. Again, I have nobody who's registered, but I would have Clint mention the event that's coming up on Sunday.
On Sunday at our own Broski Center and over by our pickleball court, we're going to be hosting our 3rd now, I believe, Taste of Platteville. Or is it more than that? 3rd, 4th? But from 1 o'clock until 4 o'clock, we're going to have a sampling from over a dozen different vendors from the community that are going to be serving there, including some adult beverages of malted variety. Each sampling is $1, so it is a taste, and you get to sample quite a variety. Special thanks to Director Walsh in the back, who did a lot of the heavy lifting on getting it all coordinated and put together this year. And if you have not yet signed up for pickleball, is there opportunity? There might still be opportunity to sign up for pickleball, as there's a tournament going on in conjunction with that on the same day.
Any other persons with things they want to point out, other than it's homecoming week for the high school? So if you're around and about town, there's probably a lot of toilet paper and trees.
We tried to tell them not to do it. We really did.
You tried to tell
We
them.
You
Not
know,
successful.
Not at all.
Okay. Reports that were in your packet, the zoning board of appeals from Todd. He's not here. Police and fire commission, Kathy, anything?
Nothing to add.
Water and sewer commission, Ken, Tom, or Lynn?
No addition. Yeah.
Plan commission, you've heard our action tonight. Museum board, Tom?
Nothing to add.
Okay, commission on aging, Lynn?
Nothing other than the fact that we are looking for more members. We are currently stifled with doing any movement because we don't have enough members. So if anybody wants to join, they need to reach out.
And I would remind people that our ordinances require residency within the city of Platteville. I've had a lot of volunteers lately, including a couple today, who from outside the city of Platteville, and we can't do that. We have a couple boards, that we have 1 or 2 openings for non-Platteville residents, but most of the time it's a city of Platteville resident. Okay, let's move on to the action items on our agenda, the first of which is amending the official traffic map. Accessible parking on East Main Street near the museums, and we're going to have Cody and Howard, tag team on this, I guess. Tag team.
Go ahead.
So, we do at the museum, a few years ago, accessible parking was created, or handicap accessible parking was created behind the Rock School, which is the old mining museum. It is currently not used for public visitation, and the Hanmer Robbins building is used for public visitation. So we are requesting that an accessible spot be located on East Main Street so that we do have handicap accessibility near the front doors of our museum.
Howard, anything to add?
No, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay. We heard about this last time. Go
Make
ahead.
a motion. I move to approve ordinance 24-11 and ordinance amending the official traffic map, accessible parking on East Main Street near the museums.
Second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Bob and a second by Lynn to approve ordinance 2411, amending the official traffic map and creating an accessible parking place in front of the museums on East Main Street. Jerica will vote.
Dawes,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes?
Killian,
Yes.
Null,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cock.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is authorization to sell city-owned property at 210 North Bonson Street. It just says sale of, but this is not really the sale. This is authorization to sell, right?
Correct. Yes, we don't have any purchasers yet, but we'd like to see if we can
Yeah,
find
I'd
some.
like to be
Yeah,
able to
so,
sell it.
excuse me. Yeah, this property has most recently been owned by Family Advocates. It was one of their properties that they used as part of their shelter activities. But back in 1985, the city helped Family Advocates obtain ownership of that. We got a grant, and I'm not sure if the city put money in directly. I don't recall that in the files. But anyway, at that time, the city put a deed restriction on the property that said at any time it ceases to be used by Family Advocates as a shelter, it automatically reverts back to the city of Platteville ownership. So basically earlier this year, it became our property when Family Advocates opened their new facility. So before they obtained it, I think it was a rooming house of some sort. But Family Advocates use it as a duplex residential property. So city would like to, or staff is suggesting we sell the property, put it back on the tax rolls, find a private owner to purchase it and utilize it again as residential. So I had put together basically a request for bids document that I would like to distribute and see if we can get some interest in somebody to purchase the property.
Okay.
Question, do you put down a minimum as far as what you want for a price? In other words, if you use the assessment coming up or present for the property, at present for the property?
Well, there is no assessment because it's been nonprofit owned since 1985. It's tax exempt, but we could put a minimum bid in there if you'd like.
But we have reserved the right to refuse any and all bids, right?
Correct, yes.
I don't think.
In
it's
other words,
necessary.
we could be given the assessed value of the property in the future.
There is no assessed value, is that right?
Correct, yeah, because it's
Yes,
been,
but
it's
still,
tax exempt, so
we
it's,
could we not ask the accurate appraisal for the assessment value?
we could ask them if they would give us a estimate, but at this point,
Yes,
they
I
don't
would
have
think that'd
one.
be important.
It's not taxable when the city has it, correct?
Correct, and Family Advocates was tax exempt as well.
So it would be, I don't know whether it would benefit us to ask Accurate to basically give us a cost. I think the best thing to do is to have a number of realtors come in and give you what the market is. Is that all right?
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, like Barb said, we just see who bids the highest, and if we don't feel it's high enough, we
We
reject it and
re-advertise.
start over.
Whatever you want to do, I just thought if you wanted to get a market value, realtors could do that for you.
My experience with this has been that people try to buy these things at the lowest possible. I think we need to do better than that.
Whatever the council wants to do.
We can always say no, and it's not a property we want to hold on to. I mean, so if we get something that's reasonable, I think we would just unload it.
Better to get
I would-
tax
I would
dollars
agree.
for
I
it
was
than
just gonna
to
say, we
continue
can-
to heat
the
it.
tax dollar scenario,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that.
As Joe said, you're going to generate, the idea is to generate a market through an auction type of approach to it. By going through an RFP process as well, is that you're given an opportunity for the council to still hold some controls on things that you would like to see done with it versus trying to find an appraisal amount and going out for purchase that, where then there's less control, but you do have then a more of a chance of getting a higher type of a monetary value.
The route that Ken is suggesting is will it cost more than just putting it out there? We'd have to pay for somebody to appraise it. Correct?
Well, I mean, that would be one option to actually get an
Right.
appraisal. Otherwise, we
Right.
could just ask Accurate for an estimate of the value. Or as Tom said, we could just try to get some estimates from realtors, but either way, it's gonna come down to who's gonna give us the highest bid and whether we feel that number is high enough or not.
Right. Because right on here, we've said the city retains the right to reject all bids.
We have a company that is working for us, giving us appraisal assessments.
Would like to make a motion to approve using a request for bids to sell the property at 210 North Bonson Street.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion to approve issuing a request for bids to sell the property at 210 North Bonson Street. Motion by Kathy, second by Ken. Jericho will vote.
Doss,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nall,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cock,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is resolution 24-13. This is accepting the DNR stewardship grant for the East Side Trail Extension Project. Joe.
Right, so the Community Arboretum has been working on a project to extend the Roundtree Branch Trail, connecting Business Highway 151 to East Side Road, basically following the old railroad right away. So earlier this year, the council did authorize the application be submitted to the DNR for a grant to assist with that application. It'd be a matching grant up to 50% of the project costs. Well, we did receive a letter from DNR saying we've tentatively been selected to receive the grant in the amount of $136,700. So it would require a local match with the same amount in order to get that full amount of the grant. So the Platteville Community Arboretum has indicated they would be working to do the fundraising and other grant applications to obtain that local match requirement. So the city's responsibility would be administering the grant. We would actually be acquiring the property. We would be the owners of the property moving forward. And then we're assuming that there would be some maintenance responsibilities on the trail itself if the need arises in the future, similar to the existing trail situation. So there are some additional details that need to be worked out with the DNR on agreements and so forth. before it's all finalized, but before they're willing to proceed with those additional steps, they need confirmation from the city that we are willing to accept that grant.
Any questions?
Yes, when this came before us before, PCA has agreed to do the fundraising.
Correct.
What happens if they don't use the funds?
So the amount of the grant that we receive would be limited to the amount that they would able to fundraise for. So it's a matching grant. So if they were only able to raise 100,000, we would only get $100,000 grant. So it'd be adjusted on that.
So it's, my concern is that it would come back and have to, if they raised 100, that the city would have to make up the rest.
Well, I think you could add to the motion, Kathy. This says motion to accept the DNR stewardship grant in the amount of $136,700. And I would add with the understanding that the Platteville Community Arboretum will be responsible for funding the matching amount. Is there any?
I do have a question, Joe. Future use of this trail, are you thinking about putting eventually lights on in the trail?
We got that far yet.
Well, I'm just asking because I think it's important if we look at the future and at least have a preliminary plan if we need to put lights in or it's feasible to do so. I would like to see that because that area is fairly dark. If somebody is walking it late afternoon on a December day.
I used to be a member of PCA, I'm not anymore. And I believe right now by the property
Right.
and the development of the trail.
Bob, you gotta speak into your
The
microphone.
development of the trail would be a future project, but right now they're just wanting to purchase the land so they own it, so it's there in case, they can raise more funds to develop a trail. I don't think that they're thinking of having a lighted trail. I think it's just more of a trail in the, initial stages. It may not even be paved. But eventually they'd like to have a paved trail going from behind Napa all the way out to East Side Road.
So it's this is a grant for land acquisition. So it's not for trail building or anything. It's just for getting the corridor nailed down.
Just one final question. So if the land purchase is made and the funds are successfully raised and is turned over to the city, if the next phase of the project would be to develop the trail, but in the meantime, is the city taking on will city resources be required, for example, next year to do mowing or anything before there's a trail?
No, I don't think there's anything there that needs to be mowed.
Okay.
I was gonna say the
Because it's
property
a-
has not been mowed at this point.
Okay.
I mean,
So it's not our intent that we would do that.
no.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I would ask for a motion.
I'll move to accept a DNR stewardship grant for the Southeast Rail Corridor Trail Land Acquisition Project in the amount of $136,700 with the requirement that the Platteville Community Arboretum raise the matching funds.
I second it.
So we have a motion to accept this DNR stewardship grant of $136,700 with the requirement that PCA raise the monies for or provide the matching grant monies. Jerica will vote.
Dawes,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Knoll,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cock.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that's the last of our action items. We'll move on to information and discussion. Audit services for the year ended December 31, 2024. Nicola.
The city has engaged with audit firm Johnson Block and Company for many years to perform various audits of city finances. In fact, in 2020, 2021, and 22, the city was required to undergo two audits, the financial audit and the single audit, which is to comply with the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations. Johnson Block is currently completing the single audit also for the year ending December 31st, 2023. We also use Johnson Block to assist the city with the submission of the conventional water rate case in 2021. And staff would like to engage with Johnson Block for the 2024 financial audit and single audit. There will be two audits again, one of the downsides of receiving a lot of federal monies. Because of the transition to a new accounting and finance manager, who, by the way, is doing a fantastic job, but with him being brand new this summer, and then with some recent new GASB statement implementations, one on leases and one on information technology arrangements, the timing and the capacity for an RFP process is not ideal. It's preferable to have the accounting and finance manager complete the audits, both of them, with our current auditor before consideration of engaging with a different audit firm, depending on responses from an RFP. And there is also some concern that was expressed to us last year by Johnson Block that due to staffing shortages in the accounting industry, combined with the additional workloads from new accounting standards and a lot of additional federal revenues, that auditing firms may not be taking on new clients. In fact, Johnson Block themselves mentioned this last year that they had stopped taking new clients. So we are still planning to request proposals from interested audit firms during 2025 for completion of the 2025 through 2027 audits. I have included an engagement letter provided by Johnson Block for the 2024 audits. And you can see there that the fiscal impact is that the cost of providing services for 2024 represents an increase of $4,100 on the low end of that range. And that estimate does include the annual work required for the TIF District 9 audit, which was not part of the 2023 estimate. That cost would be covered by the TIF district, and the remaining increase of approximately $3,000 or 5% is standard renewal increase for 2024 contracts for Johnson Block. So staff is recommending approving engaging with Johnson Block for the auditing services for the year ending December 31st, 2024.
Okay, has anybody got questions of Nicola? This is an information only item tonight. We are not taking action on this. So if you have questions on the audit firm, single audit, TIF 9 audit, any of those things, new GASB rules, you should see Nicola or ask those questions prior to the next meeting, because the next meeting will have this on for action. Tom, do you have a question?
No.
It's just your black hat. Okay. All right. Anybody else with questions? Okay. Then that concludes the information and discussion items. Our next item on our agenda is our work session on the capital improvement plan and the capital improvement budget proposal for 2025. We will take a short recess so that Clint and Nicola can set up their computer. So we'll take about a 5-minute recess, reconvene about 6:45, and we will reconvene at our desks, not at the table, because of the PowerPoints that will be seen. So thank you all. Okay, Clint.
All right, thank you
We're
very
going to
much.
start talking about the city of Platteville's 5-year capital improvement, not budget, This is the 5-year capital improvement plan.
So as we go through this, we're still working on kind of defining some of the language that goes through it. CIP is kind of loosely referenced to CIP, capital improvement plan, capital improvement projects, capital improvement projections, capital improvement budget. As we kind of molded, what we would like to arrive at is to have a document though that stretches out 5 years that essentially is kind of a anticipated budget, but understanding that that's kind of different from the next year's committed annual budget in which we're going to raise tax levy for. To make it more confusing, though, we might be making financial commitments, though, to future years' budgets as we talk about long lead items, if that all makes sense. And as we get into it, hopefully it pans out. I'd like to start by thanking all the department heads and staff that put the time into putting together the many proposals and for the work that was done in arriving at the process. I'd like to thank Steve for being here tonight to represent the thousands that couldn't make it tonight, but he's going to help us get the message out to these folks. As we go into this, as promised, it's going to be kind of story format. There's kind of two main focuses. Again, as we just alluded to, we're looking at establishing a budget for 2025 capital improvement projects, but then also trying to gauge out and take a look of what the next 5-year looks at. The presentation I'm going to take you through is kind of that journey and that process that arrived. It's the draft document that Nicola sent out to you this afternoon around 3:30. It's about 140 some pages of the actual draft CIP plan. So the slides I'm showing you tonight are different from that, but it's showing you how we arrived at that. For brevity's sake, and while I still have eye contact going, we're going to try to wheel through some of this contact things to save some neurons for you guys to have discussion and ask questions at the end of this. So slide 2 here. We're looking at just our agenda as was approved by the Common Council. We are into September, completing September, if you can believe that already. And this is a refresher on here. What is a capital improvement planning? Essentially, as we talked about, we're trying to arrive at kind of a twofold, a 5-year working blueprint, as well as a budget for the following year so we can set levy. Slide number 3 is again, a reminder from last year. The one change on this from last year is that the top one with our general obligation bonds, we now include notes. As we're familiar, there was change in statute. Now it allows notes to go out for 20 years. So we plan on taking on more notes in the future than bonds. But these are your different funding sources that go into capital improvement projects. And with that kind of all nestled in your head, we'll get on to the main content here of what we're going to try to accomplish tonight. So it's going to be a presentation, a recommendation from myself. There has been reference material that was put out regarding the last year's CIP, which came to you in a document late this afternoon, another hefty document that showed last year's CIP projects along with costs and with some of the completion statuses as updated.
Interrupted the people who get their packets in paper, get a copy of the CIP status report from 2024 and prior. A paper
If-
copy.
I'm not sure if it went out. If it went out when intended, which would have been on yesterday, when the other reports went out, then they would have. If it didn't go out yesterday as intended, then they would not have.
Out yesterday. I certainly didn't get it yesterday.
And we can definitely provide that to those council
Got
members.
mine today.
Okay.
2 big copy, smaller copy.
In
There was a third item, which was a couple of pages of the 2024 and prior budget, CIP budget items. So we can certainly get a hard copy to those council members.
those to you folks as well. We're going to review values, tenets, and financial changes and capacities. We'll talk then about the process that we went through in arriving at the draft. We'll show then the items identified by directors, and then we'll arrive at the city manager review and recommendations. At that point, then it'll be turned over to President Council Doss then to lead through discussion, action items and such. Did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question here. It says review of values, tenants. What do you mean by tenants?
We'll get to that. These are kind of the principles that we're building some of the financial plan.
Because
plans on.
tenants has different meanings, so it could be somebody living someplace.
Well, let me arrive at it, and if there's a different type of a
the definition, he's just asking what definition you're putting to tenant.
We're not gonna have anybody living in our CIP plan, so this is kind of more put on the pillars that we're building some of our financial values and philosophies on. Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so rolling along here, as we talked about the quarterly report, we'll get that to you in paper format so that you folks have it if you have not received it digitally. And to talk on it now for review of our values. This kind of bridges more into 2025, which we intend with strategic planning. To review this, what you're seeing in front of you right now, again, is a city manager drafted approach on capturing your values and putting them into meeting. And this is kind of how it was in my brain kind of put together and how we're shaping some of this. So this is put out as a preliminary on, this is something you probably want to consider as we go into future years as it helps shape the course of the road. Please center your attention on the needs there that you see on the top is needs at a responsible level and our desires at a feasible level. Certainly a lot of those fall in the eye of the beholder, but that's kind of what it was kind of the bottom niche in the context of trying to put all the values together. As we roll then into the tenets, Ken, this is kind of what we're talking about right here. We're trying to review through our many different statutes and ordinances and previous practices and things that might have been established on agreements and all these things to arrive at what context do we start each year with? Where are our borders and our boundaries in our sandbox that we can play in? So if you can kind of visualize the two sections here, the top is kind of more of your thou shalts that we have in place. And this is your statute. We have to abide by levy limits that's imposed by the state statutes, less different exemptions that are made for those statutes. We have to then meet maintenance of effort requirements of supplemental shared revenue. Most of that kind of centered towards public safety elements, or we risk forfeiting that supplemental revenue coming to us from the state. Ordinance, we have an ordinance in place that says we will maintain less than 3.5% of our total equalized value in debt. Of course, the state statute would put that at 5%, but we have that established by ordinance. Administrative policy that we have in place also says that we're going to maintain undesignated general fund balance of 20% of our general fund budget. And then kind of in our other ones that we've acknowledged through last year's process and through prior practices is we have Roundtree branch trail agreements for kind of two of those. We talked last year in regards to the stream bank stabilization of a request of having that in place every 2 years. And then there is the kind of more of a into kind of premise that is listed with language of as desired. With the seal coat completed every 5 years, that is put in the agreement as a quid pro quo in which PCA would meet $25,000 provided the city, I'm sorry, not 25,000, $2,500 in the context that the city would keep up with the trail on a 5-year complete resealing program. Other practices that we've engaged in previous years has been to try and not exceed borrowing of CIP in the amount of the principal in the previous year retired, which we'll talk about tonight. And then the city has historically contributed $15,000 to airport CIP. So as we go forward through this budget, and as we start thinking about future budgets and strategic planning, visualize this as really as what's kind of setting the ceilings and the walls and parameters for myself and for these folks to start putting pieces in place as we go forward. Considerations for, as examples on significant goals, whether it's road infrastructure or keeping up with wages, or we want to talk about levy impact to keep that at a projectable things. These are all things that we could be thinking about when we shape future policy like this. Review on our financial changes. As we talked about, the 20-year notes are now in place, which is going to be that we do less and less bonding. The advantages with notes is that we do gain more flexibility. The notes allow for a wider verbiage in which the funds can be used and transitioned for use. We have changes in our CIP format, which you'll see in the document. We have now a deferred projects or a shelved or shovel-ready type of a page now that captures that. Last year, our projects that we deferred, we pushed down the line into year 5. which works in helping us keep transparency so that we don't lose sight of that. But then it created this huge swell of millions and millions of dollars in projects that impacted then our financial planning when we sent that document off to Ellers. So in trying to match both of those of preserving transparency on budgets that our directors are bringing forward as identified items, with also though building project that is, or a plan that's financially feasible for us in the future, that's where we've arrived as a solution. The theme of last year's budget was based on gratitude and appreciation to the state of Wisconsin for the increased supplemental share in revenue. As such, and to show that appreciation, we tried to keep a level tax burden increase in last year. This year, the budget is kind of built more into the tune of realignment. We're tentatively expecting with this CIP budget that you're going to see here tonight and how operational budget is shaping up, somewhere in the tune of 5% to a 10% increase to be determined. But that does include, though, the borrowing that we did for the fire facility, which is going to impact next year's tax rate. Okay, one more piece of upload here before we start getting into this is going to be in regards to our financials and our capacities. As you start visualizing through these projects that you would like to see changes or amendments, additions, subtractions, those types of things, some hip pocket numbers include for this year's budget, essentially about $60,000. If we're going to add that to a levy burden, equates to about a 1% levy increase to the base burden. Okay. If we start talking more then into the tune of like debt service and amortizing those levy expenses in that kind of a capacity, then about $500,000 in debt principal gained impacts about 1% of the city's legal debt capacity. If we're going to stay in focus on our ordinance, which would say 3.5%, it ends up being roughly about $300,000 of impact towards our debt capacity established by ordinance. And then also keep in mind, we have identified large projects on the horizon. Some of those include the West Main Street water project that we talked about in a work session a few months ago. We have Well 3 and water treatment building that is reaching end of life. We have Streets Garage that is reaching end of life. We have a pool project that is not listed here as we wait for recommendation from a subcommittee that would also be appropriate to consider where and how that's going to fit as we consider debt capacities. From our meeting that we had with Brian and Ellers, maybe not last meeting, but maybe was it 2 meetings ago? Maybe it was just last meeting. When we took the borrowing out for the fire facility, we were given the most frequent estimates on our capacities. So you see they're highlighted on the right column underneath the orange there. It's showing our current availabilities, our percentage of our limit, and then our residual capacities if we're going to reach, first off, the state statute limit of 5% or pushing against our own policy limit of 3.5%. So we have 43% remaining at the end of the year, which equates to 29 million. At the end of the year, or beginning into next year, we're at a 62% of our 3.5%, or roughly 13.7 million of capacity. Okay. Keep all those thoughts in your mind. Don't lose one of them as we go into the process now, okay? So the process, and I wish I had more fancy narrative or graphics and such to make it more illustrative, but essentially what happened is the city manager released out 2025 budget and CIP guidance to directors. The directors of administration then released a CIP worksheets. It's all put together in a big Excel spreadsheet, which matches a lot of the pages that you're seeing in front of you. The individual projects flow into department summary sheets. Department summary sheets flow into total CIP projects, and then different hyperlinks go different ways. And Nicholas spends many mornings and late nights making it all connect and work. Directors then completed and submitted those projects and updated them on those CIP Excel spreadsheets. Nicola compiles them. The directors then present to myself and Nicola in educating us what things mean and helping us clean them up to make sure that we're all on the same expectations, as well as then giving their pitch on what's important, why it's important to myself. The city manager then reviews those, tries to sift out what seems to be the I don't want to say the best ideas because they're all really good ideas. It really comes down to perhaps what is the most digestible and least worstest ideas to try to pull off, if you will. And then I had a follow-up meeting with directors in which I broke the news on what I think we're going to try to do. Got some final minutes of feedback from them. And then here we are tonight to present to you the recommendation, as well as then getting your guidance on what you would like to see for final product. Okay? In a very big picture scope of things, this is what initially came back in the requests. Lots of numbers, but let's just first kind of take a look at, what the context is here. So this is the overall 5-year plan that's stretched across from 2025 to 2029. You'll see on the right. The top section of that is your funding sources, which is on the left there is just how are you paying for all these things. And then the bottom part is expenditures, or it's use by departments and functions, where all these expenditures are arriving at that reaches the balancing on the bottom. Okay. If I can have you zone or kind of zero in on 2025, the top 2 columns there, you'll see about a 2.8 number underneath our capital projects, levy reserves, and then a GO debt of 1.5, if you can see those 2 numbers there. Our goal in kind of approaching 2025 was to get those to essentially a 900,000 and a 1.3. Is that correct, Nicola? Am I remembering that correctly? We're trying to wean those down. So to get from a 2.9, I'm sorry, a 2.8 to 900,000, and to get from a 1.5 down to a 1.3. Okay. And now we're going to start now into the moment that we've so eagerly built into now. We're going to start getting into the actual budget. So we're going to start with, yes.
Go back one slide.
Yes,
You're
please.
trying to go from 2.8 million on capital
Capital
project
projects levy reserves. Yep.
To 900.
To 900,000.
And that number was determined by?
The number here is the initial request.
No, not the 2.8. Why 900,000?
So 900,000, go ahead, Nicola. You're going to answer this. Wait.
Sure. So, well, actually, technically, the 900,000 was kind of a starting point, but we really needed to bring that down to about 750,000 in combination with using some debt for some of the large equipment, street equipment that we have to purchase these days. And what that represents is where we have targeted over the last few years for our CIP that's non-debt supported CIP. So we know that we have a certain amount of capacity to use reserves. So that would be the surplus in excess of 20% of budgeted expenditures in our reserves or fund balance, plus how much approximate capacity we have for new tax levy for CIP purposes, while also trying to pull together the operating budget, which will drive a different set of needs for operations for the city.
But basically the 900,000 is general fund reserves and some tax levy money.
Yes, so
Okay.
that was the share, those two shared together.
Okay, and the geo debt, you're trying to take 1.5 to approximately 1.3?
Correct.
And the
Um,
1.3 represents the amount of debt being retired
In a previous year.
in a
That was
previous
levy
year. Because
supported.
our
Yeah.
levy
and
supported debt, our goal has always been to not borrow more than we're retiring.
Yes, as we talked about back on the tenants page, of which
So that's where those two numbers came from. So it wasn't just like they picked 900,000 and 1.3 out of the middle of nowhere.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. Nope, it's trying to get that down for 2025. Yep. Okay, good questions. We're going to dive now into the department projects here. And I'm thinking, Madam President, to try to make sure that I get through my presentation and allow you folks yet to have brain power and not be zombified. I think I'm going to go through all of them, kind of a little bit hasty. I would recommend to take notes as we go, and then you can circle back on your allotted time to then come back with questions then for directors on what does this mean and what does this project arrive at? And we'll address it that way. If you have questions though, of course, in the context of what does the spreadsheets and things mean, by all means, but specific questions on projects, let's hold those to the end, if that sounds fair. So using Doug as our guinea pig out of the chute because he's a good target for that. We're looking at now a department budget. You'll see how it's broken down in the same type of a thing as the.
Advance your slide.
Ah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Doug's budget here, it's kind of laid out in the same way as the summary where you're seeing this funding sources on top, and then you're seeing the uses by programs or projects, and it's got the name of them, and then the cost impacts across the year. So some of them are reoccurring, some of them happen in one specific type of a year. The black in ink on there is, of course, what was there originally. The green items represent hyperlinks and things like that, I think.
Those are the new items that have been added since last year.
Okay, new items, thank you, from last year. They're all hyperlinked now, though, on your PDF if you're scanning the actual document.
So just to clarify that point as well. So in order not to overtask our deputy city clerk, I asked her to link the first project in each department summary. So like, for example, if you clicked on squad car replacement, it should take you to that detail page. But then if you want to find other detail pages for PD, you would just scroll down from that point through the pages rather than having every single item linked.
Okay, and that'll be on your other document, not on this PowerPoint.
Correct.
Okay. Other things that you're seeing on here then too is that my marks are in here then on red of the recommended changes to the director's plans this year. These marks though don't equate then with number changes on the bottom for the total tallies on the bottom. They do arrive though on the final document. So on Doug's budget here with the police department, the recommendations made by the city administrator, city manager are the roof fund, removing this contingency. This was the idea of a non-lapsing roof fund that would build up for the police department. Recommend removing this from the police department and adding though a contingency of $50,000 for city use to try to centralize our many different risks. I'm gonna keep it on here though so the idea with a centralized fund is we're going to try to almost like an insurance is we're going to try to absorb risks across several different departments with this contingency type of fund. We hope that it's going to be enough in place, have it incrementally grow. If it creates so much balance in the future, we might be able to then to lapse some of it and apply it towards future CIP projects. You'll also see detective car is recommended to push 1 year out to 2026, and that the community service officer truck is recommended to push out until 2027, and you'll see the other items there in the corresponding years. For sake of brevity, again, in respect for having time, I'm going to then go into the story of Director Jessie Lee Jones. The items that she has on here includes tech replacement, lactation space, the door replacement, relamping, workroom expansion, security cameras, and carpet replacement. With the recommendation here tonight, this is a unique one where it's recommendation to Common Council and also for consideration for Library Board that drives operations there. I'm recommending shelving the projects of door replacement, relamping, and workroom expansion, essentially kind of for the same reasons of we're working with the owners group on when a gifting of the building would happen in place. These systems currently do work. They're less than ideal, but until we get a firmer footing on what that looks like, it is recommended that these 3 items are shelved. They're not lost. They're just put out there until either they absolutely fail or till an alternative funding source can become available. And I apologize. Chief Simmons is not here tonight. He was on, did he arrive? He came back from call and then is back out. He's putting out fires. There he is. Everything okay? Okay. So the CIP proposals that came forward from the fire department included portable radios and the continual replacements, a building contingency fund, equipment contingency fund, a fire station command vehicle, engine 8 pump repair, fire department UTV, engine 8 tender 4 inspector vehicle, EMS severe weather warning systems. You'll see that my recommendations on these again are building and contingency fund and equipment contingency fund to scratch those and absorb those into, again, a centralized city contingency type of a fund, which we will assume risk at a larger insurance kind of a level. Fire station is pulled out of here. That is going to arrive as its own separate fund. So we're taking it out of the CIP fund. It has its own separate fire facility fund, and it does lapse over a couple years, which also makes sense. Nicola, is there anything else to mention on that, or is that the gist of it?
No, just as, you know, as you mentioned, it is a separate fund, and we already have the revenues coming in 2024, but the expenditures won't be until 2025. So it doesn't really fit in the CIP presentation.
The command vehicle, recommending pushing that back a year. That is a vehicle with years and time on it. Another one to point out on here is engine 8, $890,000. This one would be nice to push down the line, but it is essential. And our lead time on this runs about 4 years. So we're going to be essentially paying in 2026 to hold a place in line to receive then a replacement engine 8 in 2030. But we do seal the price in 2026 and we do get 2030 technology. Okay. Moving in now to a very lengthy public works document. So again, same outlay now, but this is going to reach over 2 different slides with a lot of things going on here. So for brevity's sake, I think I'm just going to hit on the ones that are recommended changes. And if so, during the discussion and question and answer segment, council members can certainly circle back and ask if they want more detail on these. The City Hall Contingency Fund, again, looking to remove this and incorporating that into that 50,000 city capacity. City Hall lights, what you're seeing above you, recommending shelving these until a replacement project of a current lighting system essentially fails. It would be nice to have matching LED like we would have right now, but I think we'll hold what we have. Alleys, the alleys is recommend to shelf unless if and when we're willing to put in a special assessment on local properties to cover those expenses, something we're exploring. So that would come off of levy. And to say if we're going to be resurfacing alleys, we would put special assessments on those individual properties that is seeking the most near and dear benefit from them. Additional levy for street repairs. This is specific to thin overlay. Currently, our monies that we're getting through wheel tax is not keeping up enough to cover what we have. So this additional amount is out of levy, general levy, to try to stretch that. The recommendation here is to not increase it on our property taxes, but to in fact look and see if we can increase our wheel tax to stretch it out and get it back towards a more appropriate thin overlay. Did I say that correctly, Howard?
I think so, yes.
So am I to understand that 175 is all new money and it doesn't include the wheel tax money?
No, it would include the current wheel tax. It's just that we normally have roughly 110,000 of wheel tax revenue that comes in, but in order to maintain our thin overlay program, we need the 170-some thousand that's up there. So basically the choices are not do enough thin overlays.
It's all right. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to know if it included the money that we're getting or if it was all additional.
The storm sewers that you're seeing there is a change of funding source recommendation. We recommend moving that from a levy reserve to a specified borrowing through CIP. The fuel pump is recommended to shelf. Again, we'll have a contingency fund there. It's intended to not lapse. If we hit system failure, though, either we decide to move that up on our CIP plan and bump something else in future years, or we consider moving to a fuel card system through a contracted vendor, yet to be determined. The 1-ton dump truck is a change in funding source. Recommending moving that from levy reserve to, again, CIP specified borrowing project. The leaf vacuum trailers is a recommend shelf, and this one is intended to kind of plan on using it until the wheels fall off, if you will. We would have monies potentially from a contingency, or if we have indication that they are in fact failing, we can decide if we want to reinsert it and put it back into the 5-year projection. Roadside mowers and tractors, this is a change in funding source. It's recommended to remove this from a levy in consideration for a John Deere rental program beginning in 2026 for an operating budget expense. We feel like there is potential for trade-ins on such, and with the higher cost of maintenance on hydraulics, this is one that in fact does make sense to do more of a renting or a lease type of a program than ownership. The 2.5-ton dump truck, this is another change fund source. This is a recommend to move from levy reserve into a CIP specified project. And this is also another long lead item. With this one, like the fire engine, we're going to be looking for a commitment for funding that'll actually hit in 2026. The wood chipper, much like the mowers, is shelve. If contingency allows, may perhaps use that. Otherwise, we look at kind of running it till the wheels fall off. East Main Street, that is a project that we talked about in length the other night. That involves the waterway underneath East 250 Main Street by the fire facility. This one is a recommend shelf, and see if we can also perhaps shovel ready this one to work on it with state and possibly federal aid to build it from the stream, potentially all the way up to the high school as a solution. No, no, on some of these I might have just. I apologize. Yes, the ones that are saying shelf, I did have, for consistency, I should have had the line and the arrow pointing all the way to the right. And I apologize. But
Which one?
I'm sorry,
On which one?
on the wood chipper,
Wood chipper.
yep, and on the fuel pump and the street repair maintenance one is a kind of, because it's, again, it's like shelf, but perhaps we consider a different way of funding it through a special assessment. Nope, good question. Okay, so then we are on this here now. So we're at street sweeper. This is another big item, and so we're recommending that we perhaps move this off of levy reserve into a CIP borrowing, a specified borrowing project. The smart poles are recommended as a shelf, remove them off. Keep them if we can find a matching grant or something that makes it more effective and affordable, perhaps it comes back on. And then another point to note in here is that we are looking potentially for a carryover on the loader and using a CIP balance from previous years, and possibly, I think, ARPA funds to try to use that. Nick and Howard did a good job on arriving at an aerial bucket truck that came under, as well as a wheel loader that was coming under. For smaller types of overages, we typically refrain from applying those to future years for the sake that we might have other projects that come in. Let me say that again. For projects that have underages, and they came in under, so we had a little bit of gap, we typically refrain from just applying it forward in the case that other departments or other projects came in over, so it balances out. With these two, there was enough underage where it feels like we can apply those to future projects in the same type of a department. Okay, you're doing very well. Hang with me now. So then after that, you're going to see on slides 25 here, we're going to get to the deferred streets. This is all the infrastructure streets that have been identified and recommended for either this year or previous years or years in the schedule here to have maintenance. You'll see the name of the street. You'll see the Pacer rating. You'll see the feet. You'll see the year that it was initially planned or recommended, the year that it's deferred to, the ranking, and then the estimated cost. This is all of our street infrastructure on slides 25 and 26. It does include on there East Mineral Street, which I know that we've had previous discussion on, and that is the bottom one that is on there. Moving into Parks and Forestry, Director Lau. These are the different items that were brought forward again. We have tractor mower replacement, park playground contingency, water fountains, security cameras, Mound View campground parking, Parks Garage, Highland parking, skid steer amphitheater, Harrison improvements, Parks utility vehicle, Parks dump truck, and a pool vessel removal are the current identified projects. The recommendations for your consideration tonight include removing or shelving the Mound View campground parking until potentially there is donation or grant opportunity that becomes available. The Parks Garage, I think we shelve that and we determine what's going to happen with the aquatic center first before we begin moving on that, as that is currently a shared building with the pump house and the maintenance area. Highland Park, recommend again shelving this until potentially a grant or donation opportunity becomes available. Likewise with the amphitheater, shelving until a donation or grant opportunity becomes available. The skid steer, recommend removing this from a specified levy from a levy project. Certainly recognize though that this comes with the extent of extra wear on the streets skid steer, and it is a less convenience of getting our operations done to try to balance work schedules, but recommend shelving that. The Harrison improvements, recommend again shelving until a donation or grant opportunity potentially were to come available. The pool vessel removal, estimated at around $300,000. Recommend that we shelve that until we decide what the future of the aquatic center is going to be. And then it was also recommended that we add a trail extension for the specific project that was approved tonight. Now granted, that's an expense out of roughly $272,000, but it's then, as motion said tonight, it's going to be paid for through state of Wisconsin grant and donations, but trying to incorporate that into our CIP plan, our CRP plan to show as an action on behalf of the city. Moving into museum. Cody here is our newest and youngest warrior on the team. Recommending essentially to take projects that are in place and shelving them until Cody is starting embarking right now with his board and with his foundation on strategic planning and seeing how that marries up with the capital campaign program that was also or study that was recently completed. So until they have an estimate kind of on what direction that they want to go with existing services and existing educational types of materials, we're going to put a pause on those until we can complete that planning. Community development with Joe's programs here. The comprehensive 2025 comprehensive plan update is on here. This also includes or is anticipated to include strategic planning with yourselves to be able to work through some of the tenets and things and major goals that you have as you help shape policies like this very one here. The East Main Street site closure is anticipated to bump those two payments out a year for the sake that it doesn't look like the anticipated that the owner is going to be ready. And then you have two placeholders on here of $25,000 for 2026 and 2027 for the 200-year celebration of the city of Platteville, which happens in 2027. I'm not sure what the expectations are with that event at this point. Trying to gauge through just ideas on, well, does that arrive at an expanded Heritage Day event at 4th of July? And perhaps it calls for a committee. But at the onset, looking at the entire budget, my initial response would be, it is a lot of money that we are holding in reserve with a lot of other needs. Doesn't mean it's not merited. I just want to make sure that you folks, know that it's of value in comparison to everything else, that we keep it on this plan. Administration projects. Most of the directors are noticing that nothing got cut on this one, which seems suspicious at first, but the IT infrastructure is our every other annual purchase. City park improvement is done in conjunction with multiple different departments, so we kind of seated it underneath here. It involves elements of Bob's World with planning on benches and planning amphitheater type of improvements. It touches Doug's World a little bit with increased camera coverage on the statues, etc. So that's why it's housed here. And then we also have phone replacement system with our MyTel system. So
If I can just interject, there is also on your full copies, there is an additional line item in this department that we added, which is the citywide contingency that Clint has been referencing. It just isn't updated on this slide, but it is in your larger projection, 5-year projection document.
thank you. Thank you for bringing that out. Okay, so now, gang, with all those changes as recommended, now you're arriving now at a new summary, and that looks like this. I'll give you a moment just to kind of digest it, but again, kind of the two numbers in the top left with the capital projects levy reserve and the geo debt. We came down from 2.8 million in levy to roughly 786. And we came down from our previous number for our geo debt of about 1.8 or 1.8 or so to about a 1.7 and change. So I'm certain, no, where were we arrive at? Yes. We increased. I'm sorry. We went to, we're at a 1.6 and a 700,000. How this arrives is that we do have some amortization of some of our CIP needs. We're pushing a little bit more into new debt, which arrives at more CIP stuff, but then it's, less direct levy and it's more debt service as that gets realized over the extent of a 20-year note. And at this point, then I would kind of perhaps let Nicola just kind of reference then the actual drafted CIP plan that's on your desk right now. If there's anything that you wanted to say about those, Nicola?
I don't think so, really. Just as we've talked about, the the number that's in front of you then is the 786,000 of coming from levy and reserves. The portion that would come from levy will, of course, go into the total levy for the 2025 budget, and the amount coming from reserves will then reduce our unassigned fund balance. And so we examine prior years' activity in that unassigned fund balance, and we project what we think will be happening in the future. We want to make sure that we just got off the phone with S&P today for the ratings call for the debt issue that we're doing this year. So, we're mindful of wanting to keep plenty of reserves in our unassigned fund balance. They talked today about they have introduced a new set of parameters that they're using. And so reserves was kind of a focus of that. At the same time, we do have a surplus, and so we want to be able to support our CIP spending with that. So that's where the 786 comes from. And then again, the 1.7 does include a little bit more in street reconstruction than we asked Howard for. So Howard gave us the 1.3, but then he kind of added on some optional extras, and the optional extra in 2025 is $225,000 for the Southwest Road sidewalk. That's across the bridge there. And then also in there is the 1 ton and 2.5 ton dump trucks that we identified as part of Clint's presentation.
The analytics behind it then to kind of put some bar graphs and pictures to the many numbers. You're looking at the City of Platteville 2025, 2026 funding sources. You're looking at kind of where all the revenues are going to come to complete these projects and fulfill these services. And you'll see very heavy on water sewer revenue bonds as that drives a lot of our income factors. Moving then into the uses by departments. Okay, where are all the expenditures happening by services? The very tops of our little towers there is airport. Then you'll see little blips of taxi, and then again heavy into water sewer. You'll see some fire in there, especially on 2026 with the purchase of an engine. Little coats of admin, little strips of police, bigger pieces then of public works, and tiny little strips of library, and no museum on there at the present, Cody. So we talk then on, okay, what does this look like then if we take out the water sewer? If we look at uses by departments with water sewer moved as a separate type of an issue, it kind of rebalances it a little bit again, but then you'll see that our expanded percentages then kind of go into public works in comparison to the other ones. And if you look at funding sources, again, for 2025 as percentages, this is what the pie would look like. With, again, a good share of it coming from your utilities. Can I say that again, Bob?
That's correct. So this pie represents after the reduction. It's not a before and after.
This is after the reduction. Anything on here that is larger after?
Yes, it would have taken it out of that top line on several of them, like the 1.5 and 2.5 dump truck. It would have taken it out of levy for next year and put it into geo debt.
So,
bond.
Geodet, which is the red.
I had the same question.
Yep.
You used the term CIP, specified borrowing.
Ye-
That's a new term. So help us understand what CIP specified borrowing is.
I'm sorry, not to make it confusing with jargon, but yes, that would be a geo note solution for a specified project for it, rather than just saying like a maintenance. It should be about 200,000 higher than the initial. Yep.
That was, let me go back to that other slide.
Our initial was 1.505 on the
Yeah.
geo debt, excluding the fire
Geodet.
station on slide number 13. And then we arrive at a final product on slide 33 of 1,695,000. So the geo debt, we pushed up 200,000. And again, that's for the sake of trying to capture those projects and taking them out of direct levy and amortizing them by debt service over 20 years. So you're going to pay more, you're going to pay less in the front end, but it's now pushed out. Did that answer? And am I making sense, Nickel, on what I'm telling him? Correct. Correct.
So I have a question about presentation. In years past, there have been, for instance, I have brought up the word systems server. Detail. It says here that the capital project levy would be $18,500, with other sources contributing $12,000. So I'm assuming then that if I look that the 18.5 is part of this gray, where is the other 12 on this chart? Is it in grants? Is it in donations? Is it in where? Because your detail sheet says that another source, not geo debt,
Yeah. You-
not
I'm
capital
sorry.
reserve.
Which department are you in? I
I'm
apologize.
looking at the word systems server, whatever.
Oh, for the police
that is.
department?
I don't
Okay.
know if it's, yeah, it's the police department.
Yes, okay, let me catch up with you there and take a look at that.
I'm just saying, I see another one, for instance, the library, the
Yeah.
lactation room, it said $8,000 from the city and $8,000 in donations. Yet, so where are those?
So the other source for the word system server is carryover from a project in 2024. That was a phone recording system, if I'm not mistaken, that was not able to complete because of a requirement for server upgrades. I'm sure Doug can fix my bumbling attempt to explain that.
Well, and that does beg the question, because last year we budgeted, according to your spreadsheet, $12.3 million. And according to the status report on those projects, there's still $6 million that's not spent. So are you telling me that you're taking part of the $6 million allocated for projects last year and moving it to this year? Or the coming year?
So I'm looking at the police department section of the 2024 CIP status report and looking at the radio/phone recording system for $12,000. And under the project status there, it mentions that the project has been put on hold pending a needed server upgrade, and that funds would be requested to carry over. So that 12,000 is the 12,000 that's showing as the other revenue source for the project in the 2025 recommended budget. So for a total of 30,500.
I know what the total is. I'm just trying to figure out how these are allocated, because I don't see, I mean, I see grants 24%. I don't know what that means, except it says grants 24%. I don't know where those grants are supposed to be, but when I go to the detail sheets and it says other source, but it doesn't give me the source, it's like, what other source? Or if it says donations, then why is the whole amount included on the line item? I'm getting confused by how the numbers are put on your spreadsheet.
Sure.
And I just picked one. I could have picked any other one, but
Yeah. Other than the other source, which the problem is if we put every single source listed in the detail below, then it would make for too many lines. But what we can do is certainly put it in the description, either under the justification or under the description portion to identify if there's another source that's unusual, that's not a grant, a donation, a debt proceed, or a, part of the levy or reserves. So we can definitely make that improvement for the next year's plan. As far as tying into the pie chart, the totals on the summary page, as Clint mentioned, those are drawn from the department summaries, which are drawn from the detail pages. And so then at the top of the summary of funds, you see those different sources identified. As you've mentioned, the other source, the 615,750 for 2025 is not immediately apparent. You would have to get into those detail pages. And as I said, we'll certainly update those to have the other source identified when there is one. It's generally a carryover from a prior year, but occasionally it might be an unusual source of funding.
So has that been the practice then, that I can request so much money this year, and if I don't use it, then I get to carry it over next year for some project that I want to do?
It's something that comes before the council each year, and then the council can make, they can either approve or deny those requests. And not every department requests every project that doesn't complete. But generally speaking, when a department does request a project, they usually try to use those funds to complete the project if there was some reason why they weren't able to complete it in the year that it was budgeted.
But Nicola, isn't it true we don't even approve those carryovers until like February of the next year?
That is correct, yeah.
So that seems kind of counterproductive. We're approving the budget for it now and saying you can do it, but you don't really have the money because we're not gonna really levy for it. You're gonna count on us approving carryover from this budget into next year's budget.
The project would not be able to complete if the council did deny that carryover request.
It's a challenge to approve a budget several months in advance.
Understand? I'm just trying to get a feel for where those monies are.
2025 uses by department. This is your pie chart again, referencing to the summary on what it kind of looks like for the department uses. And then this is, imagine this sheet then in conjunction with Howard's deferred streets as your shelf. This is the projects that have been identified then and have been recommended to not lose, but set to the side with no identified funding source that's in place yet from 2025 to 2029. These, of course, it does not include a pool solution, has not been identified on here. And also the Mineral Street, you'll see is on there as a deferred street project. Again, the context of having that as a street project or an entire street project was the conversation on the ADA requirement for the sidewalk and shaping of slopes and everything to make it ADA compliance, essentially led to a reconstruction. And it also doesn't include any other discussions we've had regarding Jenner Park other than what Bob is taking care of at the present. So Yep. This was the recommendation on where it arrived at was 2025 levy expenses. So if it was to be done, that's the estimated expense. We would need to have some type of a funding solution, whether that is more levy burden or some other type of funding that we are unaware of, grant, or if it's, and we'll get to it, if there's, if we want to reprioritize things, then we're going to have to consider what comes off that list. Mm-hmm.
But it's 2025 unfunded. It shouldn't say 2025 levy at the top of that. Shouldn't it say, because that's the 2025 cost, and at this point in time, there's no levy for it.
Well, so it's a list of the shelved projects. So what we're doing there to the right is identifying that the request came in, and this was how the request was funded by the requester. So identifying if there was a debt portion or a grant portion. You can see that most of these are in fact levy requests, which is part of the reason why we weren't able to fund them, because we had a limited capacity for levy.
Okay. So it should be funding source request. Okay, I see. Okay.
Okay, it's
Okay.
a lot of information. I'm glad that we asked it, so we had an understanding as we approach the discussion here. Okay, so now back to the narrative then. So what does this budget do in broad strokes? So it meets many identified needs and it creates a financially feasible 5-year projection, something that the council has been working towards for quite a few years, which is a good thing. This plan includes a shelf. It's a place to hold our deferred projects that do not have identified funding sources for the next 5 years. The shelf allows for transparency in seeing those needs but it won't impact our financial forecast as in prior practice of having it tacked on the end. Now with this though, you have to understand that just because the city manager said we'll set it on the shelf doesn't mean that we're not assuming risks with a lot of these things. At any given time, a good plan gets you to the start line and we could have changes that impacts these things. This plan also incorporates a city contingency. Again, we're trying to centralize those risks and try to make a centralized insurance pool, if you will. And we're exploring maintenance tracking software right now. We're anticipating on gaining more transparency in 2025 as we build our maintenance records to try to mitigate future items, say like a pool or a major type of a system failure. What this plan currently does not do, road reconstruction. This is a 5-year projection and budget that's built on an estimate of about 1.3 local investments into street infrastructure. To achieve a recommended 40-year life cycle replacement plans on our streets, we need to conduct about $4 million of replacement annually. Now, granted, in 2025, we are catching a lot of state funds, I believe, that is helping bolster our repair in 2025, which is a good thing. But looking into those future years, we have about $160 million of road infrastructure, which divided by a 40-year life cycle is $4 million annually to try to achieve that. Our tenant, this plan is built on borrowing 1.7 million in exchange of retiring 1.3 in previous principal. In consideration for inflationary pressures combined with the growth of equalized value, the recommendation is to increase the borrowing above the retired in principal. Now, this doesn't mean that this stays as potentially continued practice, but I would advise that we assess it, see how it works with our financial forecastings going future. We know that even in the future year of this with 2026, again, with the fire truck, is that we may have more of an elevated above a principal, but then it does kind of forecast that by 2027, we're able to potentially kind of wean that back a little bit. The other tenant is this plan incorporates an estimated 10-year seal coat plan on the Roundtree Trail as it is right now. And again, the tit for tat is kind of based at language on a 5-year type of a plan. So it does comply with, if you will, the thou shalt of our ordinance, our state statutes, of our administrative policy. But in the leniency languages of our agreements identified and of our practices of not taking out more debt than retired debt, it infringes upon that. And with that being said, I would turn it over to council, to the council. I would say though that let's take a quick look at this. Is that recommend with your actions and your discussion tonight? By all means, want to make sure that we have time to entertain everybody's thoughts and concerns and questions you may have from staff. If there are particular items on projects that you would like to see more refined, say a detailed page. Like a lot of our street projects, the ones that are on the deferred list are not accompanied with a detailed page, or if it's a new project, or if it's to reprioritize things on a list or move them by year, I would recommend that that comes forward as an action by a council member and seconded and kind of called to vote before we were to take initiatives on it. With that too, it's requested that you have an action that has a balanced funding solution. Now that's kind of unfair because if it's something that's new, we don't necessarily know what the cost is like. So that's me playing kind of dirty, if you will. So if it's a costing solution that says, we want to try to do this to an estimated cost, not to go further than, potentially that's a way of saying it. Or if you want to add levy not to exceed, if you want to remove the following projects in order to allow space for this project, perhaps that's another way we can kind of balance it. Or if you want to say, I would like a defined project that is shelved for future consideration, that maybe is another way to kind of work around that. Is I know that again, it's not fair that if somebody wants a new truck or a gazebo or something like that and not knowing what it costs without staff taking a look at it. And again, then I've just got an iteration of your hip pocket numbers on here for added levy or reduced levy, and then impacts if we're talking about adding things to borrowing. With that, Madam President, I will turn it over to you to guide council through discussion.
So you're saying if I say I want to add this whatever,
Mhm.
I have to say what I'm going to take out so that it's balanced.
If we know cost of it, if it's a new project that we have not costed, it might be, I'd like to have this new truck and I recommend taking off in order of precedence, this street and this piece of equipment and this piece of software
So we
until
get
we
through
make it
enough work.
balanced.
Okay. Because we have to have balanced financial solutions. Okay.
Or directly added
Or
levy
adding
or borrow.
levy. And we see right now you're projecting already between a 5 and 10% levy increase.
With how things that, again, we have the operational side of the budget to also consider for building for 2025. But yes.
Okay. Questions on the presentation? Open discussion. Bob, you want to start or not? Do you have, you had the question about. Pull your microphone toward you so we.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I do have a question. I know I keep circling back to the pool. But one thing that we have talked about at our meetings is the removal of the current vessel. And you had said it depends on the recommendation of the subcommittee and what Parks and Rec wants, and then in the end, what the city council recommends. Let's say the city council does recommend that. Where would we just add that? It's $100,000, I believe, to remove the vessel. The $300,000 total is to do the whole, smooth the land down and everything. But let's say that, we want to remove the vessel and the city council okays that. Would that just be added to the levy, or would we need to eliminate the equivalent dollar amount of other CIP projects?
Right now, that project in particular is shelved, so it's not reflecting in any of our current numbers for the next 5 years. But if, as an example, if that's something that wants to be brought back into discussion and we want to act on that tonight, then yes, we would be looking for a motion then that would call for that to either add $300,000 to levy impact or to a borrowing, more notes taken out, or a reduction of $300,000 of other projects to make capacity for it.
Because I do think in the next 5 years, it's going to have to be done, and I think sooner than 4 or 5 years. Okay.
I guess I agree with Bob that we're doing surveys, we're doing all kinds of things. We know that the current pool as it stands is not going to, it can't be repaired. It's not going to, so it seems that to maintain confidence within our population, that there is attention being directed to the pool, that we would at least want to remove what we know we can't use.
I would agree.
I guess I was thinking that we were talking about potentially doing a bonding solution for a whole pool type of a solution. So if we were,
Including the removal of the current
yeah,
vessel.
we were talking about a referendum, which would
Yeah, but-
lead to doing it all in one type of an initiative. If that's
Okay,
not the pleasure. And again, so this plan also doesn't include factors like something else could break tomorrow too, and we would have to
True.
revisit it in future years. So while it can be added, and if we want to address part of the pool solution this year, you can, but I guess my advice would be, let's figure out on exactly what course and what it's going to arrive at as a recommendation, and then start talking about, what's all going to go into the project for a total package.
Well, my personal opinion is it's an eyesore. And it's just a continuing source of frustration for people as they look at what's there. And by not doing anything, you reinforce the opinion that nothing is being done. I don't care. That's my opinion, and I would be more than willing to look for 300,000 and other things that could be diminished in order to make that happen. I don't know how other people feel.
I have a question. Just looking at all of this information, I realize the expectation is for the council to actually make a motion to approve.
Not tonight.
So
Not tonight.
the motion, any type of a motion tonight would be if you wanted to make
Consider-
specific guidance
Okay.
that, that,
Okay,
that,
that's what I,
that way I know that all six of you tonight are behind those types of actions. And it carries more than, us making a bunch of changes only to find out that perhaps not everybody was on board with those changes.
So I'll make a motion that we find a way to include money in this budget to get rid of the current vessel and make it a presentable, at least a safe site. And if that takes $250,000 or $300,000, then I say that's what we need to do. And I suggest that we take a hard look at the other things on the list and see what we might be able to eliminate to find that.
Again, I would be asking then what the recommendations of those things are, to take off or.
Well, I can't tell you that right now, but I'll go through the list tomorrow and tell you what to take off, but I can't tell you what to take off tonight.
And in addition to that as an option, another option is to increase the levy by that amount. And this wouldn't necessarily have to be done immediately. It could be done in,
As
I
we
mean-
complete the 2025 budget, which happens in November, but obviously we want to have everything for the most part put together here in the next 3-4 weeks so that we know what we're.
So we will have, the city manager will present the operating budget, which would have a net total levy increase included. And then there will be a review session of the operating budget, which would be the time to make any suggested changes. Also, I think we would recommend that it would be through action so that so that we can garner the consensus of the whole council for any particular suggested changes, making sure that if we make that change, that everybody is in agreement with it, and that we identify how we make that change. Are we going to increase levy, or are we going to decrease something else? And so then at that point, we really need to have a budget that's complete so that we can put it in the newspaper and then adopt it at the November meeting.
No,
Second of-
yeah, I should have been more clear. I guess what I meant doesn't have to happen immediately was the removal of the vessel.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, but thanks for the explanation.
It would happen in 2025. I would
but-
suggest that it come out of the Southwest Road sidewalk extension. That's a $225,000 debt proceed expenditure. It basically connects Fox Ridge walk down Pioneer Road. I suggest that the pool is more important to the majority of our citizens than the Southwest Road sidewalk extension. So
That is
I
a-
would make a motion.
I'm sorry, ma'am. That is a debt-funded item currently in the CIP
That's
budget.
fine.
So would you want to replace the $225,000 in as a part of the promissory note for the, and then the,
Let me move other things to CIP specified borrowing, another piece of equipment. I can't tell you what, because I can't find all of them on all these spreadsheets. But I think the pool is important enough that we should have a item to begin acting on that.
Question. So if we already anticipate the pool going to be $1,000, for lack of a better term, Band-Aid on the situation so that the community understands that we're moving forward with it. So
It's
so-
gonna have to go anyway.
right. So we're gonna take it down.
Yeah,
with the
remove it.
200. Oh, yeah, okay, I can see that.
I think my main concern was I didn't see any money there for the pool in the next 5 years. And I understand you're thinking that possibly a referendum would be done. And I mean, this is something we should talk about at the next subcommittee meeting too. But would the referendum possibly be to increase the levy?
A referendum allows you to borrow money outside the levy. So yes, it increases the tax.
Would increase
dollar.
it,
Right.
because I don't know if we'd need to
I-
pull, I mean, first thing that we have to do is some geotechnical exploration. And we were talking about that, and that's going to be possibly around $10,000 to see if what is under the pool and what would be necessary to do to put a pool in that same location. And that can be done without removing it, but then as soon as, a decision is made what to do, then it needs to be removed. And I know that's going to happen it should happen before 2029. And so I don't know if we would need to do the full $3,000.
300,000.
Remove it, $300,000 to remove it and smooth all the ground out, because once it's removed, they may use that hole for, part of the construction of the new pool, I would think.
Fine.
But yeah, I think it should be in there, and if it increased the levy, that's fine. If, if we want to eliminate something else, I can see doing that too.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So this is the 100. So are you recommending $100,000, 100? What are you
Well,
recommending?
I mean, it's 100, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 100 to remove the pool.
It's 100 to remove the cement existing pool, the vessel. Correct.
And the total would be 300,000 to, in other words, put it back as
Grass.
as grass.
Yeah, to remove the pipes, to remove all the walks, to put it back to a packed, usable piece of ground.
That.
So the
It's
$100,000 was just the concrete, it's not the
Yep,
pipes, it's not any.
No, it's not all the pipes. That's why, yeah, that is correct. The pipes would be cut and left as is. So that would be the issue is if you're gonna remove the pool, you think it's ugly now, imagine with just a big hole in the ground. So that's the quandary we're at is, okay, are we going to, and I don't know if you're ready to make that decision.
Well, it's definitely before 2029.
Well, yeah, I would.
And
hope
there's
so.
nothing in there between now and 2029.
That's right.
Again, I think that I'd recommend the subcommittee work through the process that they're engaged on. They have a survey out there. When recommendations come back from the community, work with that to decide on what the recommendation is to the Parks and Recs and Forestry Committee to come to City Council and say, this is what we think that we want it to look like with these types of features and this type of a location. And then get an understanding with council then on starting to engage then on that next phase then of working with planning out for a consultant to then start getting.
So you're actually looking at 5 years.
I don't know yet what's going
I
to come
mean,
back.
frankly, if we have nothing in the budget for next year, then nothing happens during 2025. Which means the first time anything can happen is 2026. And I really don't think that that's advisable. I just don't think that's advisable.
Is it a possibility that the report from the committee is due?
Yeah, mid-February.
So if the report comes back from the committee saying, we want this, this is what we're recommending, it comes to the council, council said, okay, we're gonna, same location. 2025, if that happens in February through a process, there would be time for a referendum, right? In even April or whenever that would certainly show that we're moving forward. I guess, yeah, when I was initially thinking that we need to be proactive in doing something, but the committee is already being proactive. And I guess I would just be a little leery of putting money in and saying, okay, we're gonna put $100,000 in to remove the concrete when we don't know that's the best.
Maybe we should say we're gonna put $100,000 in to move forward with some study or something, not specify what it's for. I mean,
Well, okay, okay.
I mean, so maybe part of it would be for testing the ground. I don't know. But with nothing in the budget
Mhm.
means that nothing gets done in 2025. And I don't think that's acceptable to our citizenry.
No.
Already, we've not had a pool in 2024. We're not going to allocate any money in 2025, which means, and frankly, nothing happens because there's no money to make it happen. So we don't even start to talk about what might happen until 2026. I just don't see that as acceptable. Ken?
Well, the subcommittee is supposed to be meeting on this, and I think you're ahead of the situation trying to do it as you're saying right now. So I don't think it's the appropriate thing to do now.
But what if the subcommittee
So
comes
we
back?
We need to find out, is that possible? Are you talking about putting a pool there? Or
Yes.
just moving the stuff?
No, putting a pool there.
Well, at one time you're talking about, are we gonna put a pool there at all?
I wasn't,
Or who was talking about that?
N-
Going up?
not me.
I don't think the
Then-
committee's
I
been
don't
talking
know,
about
Ken.
that.
The committee has not, the committee is looking at putting a pool in the exact same location.
Really? The subcommittee seems like it's kind of mixed up then as to what they're
Why
doing.
don't you come to the meeting?
What?
Why don't you come to a meeting?
What I hear right now is enough.
Okay.
Really is. You were supposed to be telling us what's the situation out there. Is it feasible to put a pool?
That's
there?
what we're trying to learn, Ken.
You're trying to learn it yet.
Yes.
But they have
It's
no.
gonna cost about
You didn't-
$10,000 to
You
do a
don't know
geotechnical
that
study.
answer yet.
Correct, because we
You
have
know
to,
the answer,
we have to do a geotechnical study. We've met 3 times.
you know.
What
So
if-
there's no money even for a
Yeah,
geotechnical
So we need to,
study.
we need to know what is under there to do it. So what's your question?
My question is, when I talked with you, you said you were trying to find out, but no. So we haven't.
That's in the process right now. People have given Bob information about geotechnical places.
Give us information so we can answer your question.
What's my question?
How deep do you have to dig down, so you have to fill in with somebody else?
You won't know that, Ken, until
The study, it's like they have to dig down 15 to 20 some feet
It might
doing
be
the-
more, it might be more.
in the boring.
This is limestone area. You could go down a lot of feet.
Okay,
what if we allocate some funding for further testing, whatever it's part of the process so
Right.
that we
well,
can
and that
make
process needs to get going now. That
but
$10,000 for the testing needs to happen now.
so that,
And then as far as like, say in February, they said, the committee says, we're going to put a pool there. That vessel needs to be removed. It can't just sit there as a busted up pool.
Bob, can I interrupt just a little bit? I've contacted 3 companies to find just like how much the geo at 25 foot would be for 8 drill marks. So 10,000, what was Andrew just kind of gave a rough estimate. So we don't know exactly just how much it would be, but I would also like to say that I think Bob's point is, and Barb's point is, we need some funds to be able to start investigating, to find out what we don't know.
so
So I don't know if that goes, to me, that's a CIP project. I don't know. Maybe it's not a CIP project. Maybe it needs to be built into the operational budget, but we need money for our pool investigation in this budget, and I'm willing to take other things out to make room because there's just too many. So you're gonna have to decide whether it's a capital project or whether it's an operational project. But we need some money in the 2025 budget, or we're stuck for a whole year, sitting here again next year going, we haven't been able to do a geotechnical study because we have no money. We haven't been able to do whatever because we have no money.
What if we, per Barb, your suggestion, Southwest Road sidewalk at 275,000, put it towards
225 grand.
220, and put it towards the process of the pool. There'd be $225,000. There would be money
To do these.
do testing, and then come February, when we see the report and a recommendation is made to go ahead with the project, already going to have money to remove the concrete. And then anything else can go to referendum or whatever. Is that feasible?
So do we want to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Yeah, because I like that.
Got a
idea.
motion on the table
Yeah.
from the
Yeah, from me.
president.
Yeah. And
So,
it was
Did you
to
want to modify the wording of your? motion?
225. I don't care. You can call it a
25
placeholder
from
for the
Southwest Road.
for
side.
pool construction and take it from the Southwest Road sidewalk extension.
And you said that you would identify which project.
If you want to, if we have to do it from.
Because that's not, yeah, that was on a promissory note, so
Right.
we would need to.
So then
identify-
we'll find things that we can move to the promissory note. I can't do that looking through your pages. So I have a motion. Kathy, you made a second? Did you make a? Well, we both made, yeah,
Oh,
I had
okay,
made the
I'll
motion,
second.
you'll second.
Yep.
Okay, we'll vote. Bob,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Barb, yes, Ken?
I'm not sold on this thing, so once you get through with this, all you're gonna know is whether or not you can build a pool there, period. Initially, you said you were gonna go around and see what other people are doing as far as a pool.
Mhm.
They're doing that.
And you,
And we looked at it.
how you stopped doing that?
We've looked at other pools. We have a spreadsheet that shows local pools, what they cost.
With all due
And
respect,
So-
So I'm hearing.
with all
that,
due
well,
respect, sir,
we
we
can-
are in the middle
we
of a
can-
vote
we
at
can
this
use-
point.
Yes,
Yes.
let's, the question is, are you in favor of moving the 225 to the pool area from Southwest Road? That's a yes or no vote.
I'm not convinced as to what you're doing.
Okay, so that's a no, Lynn?
Yes.
All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yes and 1 no.
I think it's
Motion
a
carries.
mistake, what you're doing.
Okay, Bob, any other questions on budget?
I did have a question, that 10-year seal coat plan, Howard. I know someone's going to come up and say something about a 5-year agreement. What was the agreement?
I got the exact language, but I think the agreement language calls for if the city were to keep up with a 5-year plan, that annually PCA would contribute $2,500 towards the coating. Is that?
I don't know if it's 2,500 or if it's 50%, if it gets more expensive.
The agreement caps at 2,500. With the inflation that we've had over the past few years, it doesn't go as far as it should or could. If we do just the PCA trail at 5,000 a year, 2,500 from the PCA, 2,500 from the city, it would take us at least 7 years plus whatever inflation in that time to seal coat the trail.
Okay,
So what the 2,500 was good, 7, 8 years ago when we put the trail in, but it doesn't keep up with inflation. So either the PCA needs to increase their share or the city takes on more of a burden, or we extend the life. And Clint
Makes
is
sense.
asking that we extend the duration.
Okay.
In other words, we do it at a later date.
What it means is that we'll do them in smaller chunks so that
Okay.
we do it over a 10-year period instead of a 5-year period.
In other words, so many feet.
Right.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
I have the language here if you're interested. PCA annually allocates funds to the PCA endowment. PCA donor have funded PCA endowment to the point that it can easily generate 2,500 precedes annually. So the city council has assurance PCA can deliver on that commitment forever. Hence PCA is willing to extend its financial commitment to incent and encourage the city to fully seal the trail once every 5 years, as they and providers noted as is necessary. PCA offers that the city seals the complete trail every 5 years. PCA would pay 2,500 each succeeding year until the city is fully matched. The intent is to allow the city to take advantage of good sealing prices and be confident the PCA match would be forthcoming in future years.
I only have one question. Is PCA aware of this change, Howard? Have you spoken with representatives of PCA?
I have not. It's my change, and I have not spoken to them about the recommendation to extend it at this point.
Okay, Bob, does that answer your questions on the budget?
It does.
Tom, questions?
I think you basically did enough questioning.
So your question was pool. Kathy?
Yeah, I have a question about the library. I have it in front of me right now, and there's Jesse. Given the situation with the developer, I see that the library is requesting a lactation space and then increased work room space. How does any of that affect what the developer, I mean, do we have to get, do we have permission from the developer to do that? Is this money coming back? I mean,
Yeah, so
positive for the city when this, or is this?
right. So last year, when we thought at about this time we would be taking ownership, we did put in place some plans to do some building renovations once we took ownership. Since that's been delayed, we have willingly made the decision to delay some of those building renovations or, improvements to the property. However, in the meantime, I do have an employee that is expecting, and so we will need a lactation space. So rather than doing renovations to our building at this time, we're planning on adding a lactation pod. You might see them in airports or stadiums. They allow you to reserve your time with an app, and so this would be something that would be accessible to any mother in our community or visiting the library that would want to have access to that. So we're working on applying for grants and hoping that our foundation will also help with that cost.
And I'm not familiar with those, but is that a portable?
It is,
Looks-
yeah.
Okay,
basically,
okay,
yep. It's a
so,
freestanding unit that we can use, for the next however many years, and then hopefully someday move in the direction of creating something more like a comfort space for mothers or sensory needs, that sort of thing.
Where will you put this?
We've got a couple of spots in mind. Yep,
okay, that was my question.
yes, good
with
question.
respect to the
And that is why I
situation
think,
with the developer.
and I
Okay.
think that is why certain projects were shelved for this, for this next couple of years. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So in that particular case, you're asking for 8,000 from the budget here and 8,000 would come from your foundation.
Okay.
Okay,
I
any
don't
other
have anything
questions?
else.
Ken?
I have a question about Harrison Park. And I've lived next to Harrison Park since 1969. I've written out some things here in pencil. And I'd like the city manager to look these over, and I'd like to meet with him. And meet with him also at the site. I met with him once already at the site. I've talked to Howard about the situation there, and so I'd like to see what can be done. So I think over the years that there's been a lot of, I would say, poor engineering done out there as far as taking care of the situation. So I'd like to talk to the city manager and discuss this and then bring this back to the council. And then I invite everybody to come out and look at the situation. Thank
Tell
you.
us the time, Ken.
The city manager has to
Okay.
work it out. I'll give you my copy. It covers the whole back.
If the if the context is to go and look at projects, by all means, if the expectation is that you would like a detailed type of a CIP plan brought, then again, I would prefer to have consensus from folks, even to the, of yes, you agree to have me go out and take a look at a project and develop a CIP, whether it's for this year or for future years. That would give me a better indication of how much that it's going to carry. Because it would be a challenge. I have 7 bosses. If they all have the same type of a notion, then that they would like me to go check on projects around town, that would be a challenge.
Came out and talked with me about it.
Certainly, and I have no, and I'm all about that, Ken, but if your intentions is to have that arrive at me making a detailed type of a CIP project for this plan and projection, then it would be more comfortable for me to know that all 7 of my, or 6 tonight, bosses would also like to see that.
All right.
Well, then here, he tells me to come to his meeting. I'm asking him to come out to mine.
But the pool meetings are open meetings to the public. And if you'd like to come.
So.
Okay,
well,
so there was,
If you want me to come, you come and look at what I.
Can I
have
call a
for
question?
questions.
there is no motion, so there is no question.
Well,
Harrison improvements, was detailed on a sheet. Is that correct in our, because I see Harrison improvements was, shelved.
We do, I'll
So-
let
Never-
Director
never
Lau.
even listed. And I
Oh, that's
talked-
all right. It's,
I talked to Howard about it last year and he's done nothing about it.
Can I intercede? I think this is a situation where Clint just wants to know what specifically you want to
I-
have the
I will
information
tell him
supply you with.
What? I
Do
will
you
tell
want
him
a
what needs to be
CIP?
done.
Or are you just looking at, these are the things that need to be taken care of and can be done through operating budget? I mean, Ken, I just don't understand where you're coming from, because we don't need to discuss this now. Since it's already been proposed to be shelved, I think it's something
Was
that we
not
need to
even on
talk
the
about later.
Was not even on the list. There's no question about being shelved. It was not even on the list. It should have been put on the list by the staff.
well,
Again, if there's individual projects that you folks have, it becomes a challenge on, again, Ken, that we have, I have 7 folks that I respond to. So it's a challenge for me to,
Where is it there?
does that say Harrison Park improved?
this is the one that was shelved. This one is,
This says improvements. That's something else.
it is. This is different than I think what
That's
you want to
different.
talk about with the
That's-
water, with the watershed and the water that comes down and comes over your properties there.
That's right.
By the cottage. It's a different project. This is, You'd mentioned though that what was shelved, this is the detailed page with the shelved
Correct.
Harrison
Okay.
Parks project, which is different.
Like I said, I just think, Ken, this is something that Clint and you and anybody else that it can attend to see what you're talking about would be great. But I don't think we need to have a discussion now about it.
Okay.
Well, I could take next time I could probably take an hour to talk about it.
Well, I think if you want some council members to come out and look, then set a time and we'll come out and look at what you're talking about. Okay? Lynn, questions on the budget?
Yeah, I had some questions on the police budget, some numbers, but all this time that we've been I
That's all right.
figured it out, and so I'm okay.
Oh, you figured it out?
Yeah, I figured out.
You're
that
okay.
The numbers were fine. They just, yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
You answered the question about the library that I had, and then, yep. I'm good. RETT.
Okay. Then I think I didn't have any additional questions. My only question was about the pool.
Which we had action of which we're going to then
This from your,
do an exchange in regards to the south side
Did you take
road
a-
Southwest
sidewalk.
Road sidewalk.
And then they'll be looking potentially to see about funding and how that looks
Flipping
like with
through
notes
levy.
versus levy.
okay,
The other project then is I'll work with
Who's-
Ken in regards to finding a time potentially to meet at Harrison Park.
wrong.
When we put out notification though, it will be accompanied with a notice of quorum.
Or- That's fine.
And then we'd have to make sure though, too, that we're not engaging in any type of actual discussion item. It would be more of a informational and
Right.
just talk there.
Get around
That sounds great to me, Clint.
Yep,
staff,
that sounds good.
And that's pretty sad situation.
All right. I think that we have reached the end of the agenda, I believe. I'm trying to bring my council packet. Oh, no, I've got it in front of me. So I need one more motion.
Also move.
All right, we have a motion, I think, by Tom and a second by Bob to adjourn. We'll vote. Bob,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Barb, yes. Ken?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes, yes.
All right, thank you all.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
great.